Hey folks, welcome back to Failure at Retirement. This is a story of my career path, the path less taken, I believe. This is actually part three. So if you're new here or you haven't seen the previous two episodes, why don't you just start at the beginning and look for the path less taken, I think is what I'm probably going to call the video. Start there. Maybe a little boring, some of it, but the whole idea here is for folks to understand how I got the mindset I have today, how I got here, how in the world I was able to retire at 50. Even I wasn't planning on that, right? It just happened that way. So, anyway, part three, let's get into it. So, the sales job I had, they had just fired me, but I'd already been farming on the side for 2 years. And by farming on the side, it's probably a little more than what you think. The first ranch I was able to lease was 385 acres. And mind you, I'm just a guy working a 40-hour week job where I was at the time probably working 50 or 60. And a friend of mine, he really helped me. I didn't understand how to get started farming, but a couple of years prior to this, I'd bumped into an old friend, Larry, and found out that he was farming, I don't know, 4 or 5,000 acres at the time. And he was a kid just like me that started with very, very little. And I said, how in the world, like I've wanted to do that my whole life. How in the world did you figure that out? And he told me the secret to farming at that time. And I still believe this is true. And I've done some of both, so I kind of know. He said he didn't own anything, but I think his house, I think, was on 10 acres that he didn't even farm. It was too small for him. He said the secret's to lease the land. You can lease the land in this part of California, even still today, frequently for less than the property tax. Not less than the property tax for the people who actually own it, technically, because in California, you're kind of protected to a certain extent. If the land has been in your family for a long time, your property taxes are really low. But people who have bought land more recently got to pay. You pay property tax based on what you paid for the land with a small annual adjustment upwards. So anybody who bought farmland recently, it's very difficult, to pay the taxes on that. And really, you can lease it, from a family member where the land has been in the family for decades for less than the property tax if you bought it from them, but more than the property tax they're paying, if that makes sense. So it's kind of a win-win for both of you. If the landlord's not interested in farming themselves. So Larry turned me on to that, and then Larry found the ranch for me, the 385 acres. So pretty good size side hustle, right? I really wasn't looking for one that big, but you take the opportunities that come to you, right? And there's a little bit more to the story here that I'm going to kind of skip over. Larry, unfortunately, within the year, Larry helped me a lot. And the deal was he was going to do the tractor work, and he had plenty of tractors and the guys to run them. He was going to do the tractor work. He helped me on many, many things. And then I was just going to manage it, right? And I was going to manage it from the seat of my truck on the phone, going down the highway, seeing customers. That was the original plan. About 8 months into it, Larry got cancer and passed away. So that was kind of an eye opening event. And I was truly on my own at that point and had to put a lot more time into it. Not that I wasn't already, that was just my nature. But the next year, I leased another 100 acres next door from another real estate developer. And these real estate developers were just waiting to develop this ground, right? But this was 2008, and they could see it wasn't happening. So they were just going to try to hold on through the dip and lease it for farming. So I started by growing a lot of seed crops, and that was Larry's idea. I had a kind of a different idea to grow hay. Larry was a big hay grower, and he said, "That's fine, we'll grow some, but you need to look into this seed crop deal." So I found some contracts right out of the gate growing certified seed. So, certified seed for the non farmers, that's the seed you grow that's guaranteed to be weed free. The county comes and looks at it, inspects it, certifies that it's weed free, disease free, that type of thing. But to kick it up a notch, I started growing what they call parent seed. So parent seed basically comes from a small, like either university test plot or seed company test plot that's, probably a quarter acre, half acre. I don't really know for sure. Maybe a little bigger, but they'll take that seed and they'll split it maybe between a couple growers. And so I'm growing the parent seed, and with parent seed, you never get a plot. Apologize, the wind's come up, it's blowing my camera a little bit. You never get a plot more than 15 acres. So, and I was growing anywhere from like 2 or 3 acres on the minimum, but most of them were between 10 and 15 acres. So lots of work, but that ranch also had a walnut orchard on it. Also had over 100 acres of dry land, which is just winter hay ground for us in California, typically. So in 385 acres, I wasn't really farming the whole thing because part of it had an old almond orchard that just wasn't worth farming, but the developers wouldn't let me take it out. But I was double cropping, like, I don't know, over 100 acres, 150 acres roughly. I was double cropping. And what double cropping means is you have a winter crop and a summer crop. And so you're getting 2 crops a year off of one piece of land. So, and then I leased that 100 acres the next year. And 1 or 2 years later, it would have been in 2012. So I guess 2 years later, roughly 3 years later, I don't know, that owner of that crop or that land, I went to lease it from him again, and he offered to sell it to me. And I actually told him there's 2 types of farmers in this world. There's landowner farmers and there's sharecroppers. And believe it or not, I'm a sharecropper. I can't afford to own land. And he emails me back and says, "All right, well, tell your friends it's for sale and here's what I want for it." And I looked at the number and I said, "I got to buy this." I went and told Mrs. Failure, "We can't afford to not buy this." I'm never pictured myself being a landowner. It wasn't part of my farming goal. But the price he offered it for, it was unbelievable. And so it took a lot of work. Convinced the bank to finance me. I had a lot of cash at the time I used for the down payment, so that helped a lot. I was just fortunate that way. The seed crops were paying off. The walnuts that were on the ranch were paying off really, really well. And so I just ended up buying the ranch and actually got him to lower the price slightly before I bought it. So that was good too. And so I own that ranch and I'm farming. And then in 2013, I believe it was, I picked up another 80 acres. That's the ranch that my boy's still farming today. All 3 ranches contiguous, all neighboring. It was a beautiful thing. I didn't have to move equipment. It was all right there in one place. With the double cropping and everything I was doing, I was farming close to 600 acres. And basically it was me and my boy, and supplemented a little bit now and then on the seed crops with the labor contractor. My other son, my younger son, he helped a little bit in the summer when he wasn't in school, but farming's not his thing. So really just 2.5 of us, really, honestly, farming 600 acres in California. And we were growing 10 crops at a minimum every year with all the different types of seed. But really, like, we were growing sunflowers and we were growing 2 varieties of that. separated by 60 days on the calendar so they wouldn't cross-pollinate. There was 4 different varieties of walnuts, which all harvested at different times, had different needs. So really it was kind of beyond 10 or 12 crops, but we were growing all kinds of things like red onions and pumpkins and watermelons and cucumbers and Hubbard squash and all sort of different crops for seed, mostly vegetables. I had some experience in vegetables from farming with my folks. So that kept us insanely busy. And we were just farming all the time. Um, Not quite year round, but not far off of it. And one thing I learned that I can tell you is not good. You have a dry winter and your onions need water, even in the middle of the winter if it's dry. So putting in a ditch and setting siphon pipes when it's like 40 degrees outside, it's not good. When you actually have to put your hands in the water to warm them up, it's not good, not fun. Had to do that several times. Anyway, 2013, no, I think 2014, it must have been the end of 2013. I had just leased the other ranch that my boy's still farming, and the 385 acre ranch, the developers called me up and told me they were going to sell, and they wanted me to sell my 100 acres with them. Said we could both make more money. I told them they were crazy. I told them that maybe I should just buy the 385 acres from them, but it was going to take me a while to raise that kind of money, right? That's a big nut. 385 acres of California farmland next to town. So one thing led to another. They sold it. My lease was up anyway. So nothing I did. Just a new guy came in and took over. I actually went back to town and got a job at a tractor dealer selling tractors. I figured 2 things I knew something about: selling stuff and tractors. So I worked at the tractor dealership for about 6 months, and again, it wasn't working for me. I'm a little too type A, I had found out. You know, I'd been in charge of stuff before I started farming. Once I started farming, I was self-employed. It was all me making every decision. I go to this tractor dealership and I'm just shaking my head most of the times. It don't make sense to me, and I want to tell them how to run their business, but it's not my place. And they were great people. Don't get me wrong. They didn't do things the same way I would have. So I woke up one morning and spring was coming, and I already knew I was going to quit in the spring. And I decided we got to sell that 100 acres. And Mrs. Failure woke up, and I had put about 15 minutes of thought into this, guys. This is how I roll. Like, something strikes me, I just strike while iron's hot. Like, I gotta keep moving. So Mrs. Failure wakes up, or maybe it was that evening when I got home from work. I told her we got to sell that ranch. She's like, "You're crazy. You wanted to own a ranch in your hometown your whole life. We have this beautiful 100-acre ranch. You're making money on it. Like, why in the world would you want to sell? You want to be a farmer your whole life." So, well, here's the thing. Like, we had discovered Dave Ramsey a little earlier. He kind of changed our financial thinking. We were carrying close to $1 million of debt right then, which that ranch was, I think, $650,000 of it was that 100 acres, right? And then we had our house, and we had a couple tractors that were financed at that time. So it's not that big a stretch if you think about it. And so here we are, $1 million in debt, but we have a lot of assets. Actually, I'm going to back up, because one of the things that happened that I totally forgot to mention earlier, when I was 39 and I was in sales, I was reading a lot of kind of self-help books, if you will, books about sales, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, The Magic of Thinking Big, um, Nickeled and Dimed was another book I read. I actually read Trump's Art of the Deal, believe it or not, back then. It was about improving my sales career at the time, but I was 39 years old and I decided to set a goal for myself. And I've never mentioned this in YouTube before, I don't think. Talked about goals, but never mentioned this. Set a goal that I wanted to be a millionaire by the time I was 44. So 5-year goal. Okay. So that didn't happen, partially because I started farming, partially because I realized I was pushing my family too hard, making my boys work with me to make this goal. The boys weren't happy, and Mrs. Failure wasn't that happy. So hit the pause button on the goal for a couple years to get the farming started. Ended up hitting that goal when I was about 46. And so we were already millionaires. And I'm talking net worth here. So we're $1 million in debt, but we're still having over $1 million in net worth. I told Mrs. Failure, we are one bad crop away from losing that ranch. We have massive payments, massive property tax bill. I wasn't farming enough anymore without the 385 acres to make a living, a full living farming. I either had to find more land or have a job on the side, and I'd already been there, and I was there for the second time and didn't want to continue. So we discussed it and we put the ranch up for sale. And so this video is long enough. So more on that next time on Failure at Retirement. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.